Wings. Wings never changes. Since the dawn of Richard, he has been crying and blaming all of his life's problems on anything but himself due to narcissism and gluttony. Years on, Richard's life has become an uninhabitable abyss of Pepsi Cola and Wendy's chili boxes. It was in this modular home Wings was born, and it is here that Wings will die, because in Trailer 101, no one ever enters and no one ever leaves, because Wings never changes.
No, I've not seen the Ohio explosion. Let me look it up. More than 1 dozen injured, 1 killed in explosion at manufacturing facility. Is there a video? So just say it's a manufacturing plant. Oh, man. Let's see. I work for the government. All this is fear-mongering. Wings, you're giving lots of riveting commentary on these events. Thanks. What do you want me to talk about? I was listening to the fucking story. There's nothing to say. I mean, like, generally, like, an explosion of that magnitude, I don't even know what they do. I was going back and trying to figure out what they did at the plant. Just saying something's a manufacturing plant is them not wanting to get sued. That's basically what it is. I mean, I was in an explosion at our plant. I was a culprit of it. And I could tell you that story in mech class. I used to work with this guy named Greg. And Greg was a black guy. And Greg was a black guy. And I'm saying this because Greg was so afraid. Because, like, generally, when we worked on the melt deck, we kind of watched each other's back. And so I was on A and B line at that day, and he was on C line doing what we do. And generally, when you're on C line, he had to. It's a much smaller crucible than the other big furnaces. So, like, generally it gets hotter faster, and we use it for, like, specialty metals and things like that, for, like, special orders. A C line was like a special order line. Well, Greg wanted to take some lunch. So generally when you're a melter, to take lunch, what you do is you heat it up a little bit. Basically you go like 20 degrees Celsius over where you're supposed to hold it at, and then you turn the power off, and that buys you about half hour, 45 minutes. So you can go eat lunch, come back out, and turn the machine back on and be there with the machine. That's how basically we took lunch, because we were actually short-staffed at the time. So Greg goes and does this. But what Greg doesn't know is when he presses the button, because there's an emergency off button, he goes to press the emergency off button. It doesn't turn off, but with bad chance, the light burns out the exact moment he goes to turn the switch off. Right? So, like, the machine is still on, giving power to the metal, heating it up. But in his head, he thinks he turns it off. So Greg thinks he turns the machine off because the light burned out. And he goes and goes, sits down, eat lunch. Generally, on the melt deck, they didn't really give a fuck about how long you took at lunch, right? Like, nobody wanted to do our job. Our job was hot. It was sweaty. So, like, the boss man came in and you've been in there. We only got half hour for lunch. But if you're in there 45 minutes to an hour, nobody really cared. Nobody stepped on your toes, because most of the time the boss man couldn't do your job, right? Our job was very special. Like, only very few people worked, operated the crane and such. So Greg takes a 45-minute lunch. He comes back out. And as soon as you come back out, the first thing you want to do is you want to test the metal. You want to see how hot the metal is, and see if you need to turn the machine on or you need to hold it, whatever you got to do to keep the metal at holding temperature. Because if you get it too hot, it burns through the liner. If you get it too cold, it does a thing called bridging. Bridging is basically when it starts to solidify in the actual crucible itself. Well, when Greg came back out, it was white. And, like, when I tell you white, it was white. Because, like, first thing I heard was, like, I was about to go to lunch, because we generally didn't take lunch at the same time. So, like, I was on A and B line. Next thing I hear, like, we had these PA system in the plant. And he's like, Jordy Jordan, come to C line. So, like, I was like, oh, whatever. Let me go to C line. Right? Because it was just me and Greg on shift that night. And we go to C line, and Greg, and this is where I said he's a black guy. He was white as a ghost. Like, he was like this cup. Like he was so afraid he was about to lose his job because this was like 2007, right? 2000, I think it's 2007. It might have been at the tail end of 2006, but the new Tundra just came out, like the one with the I-Force with 365 horsepower, and Greg got him a new Tundra. Like this was like 2 weeks after he got him a new Tundra, and and Greg also had kids. He had a wife and kids and stuff like that. He just got him a new truck, and Greg pointed it out to me because and I'm like, Greg, we can't hide this because generally, like I was saying, we like if you mess up, like you do something wrong, we kind of watch each other's backs and like don't ask, don't tell, don't snitch on each other, because like this thing was bubbling white because we had these big thick silver coats and gloves, and we had hard hats on. We had these face shields that came down over the hard hat. I looked into the metal and it was white. It was like that, like just a pool of white, and it was so hot it melted the face shield, right? So we had to call Code Red. So it was like Code Red, C line, Code Red. And then when you call Code Red, all the bosses and everybody, the maintenance guys, everybody comes to wherever Code Red is. We had to start an emergency back pour. Back pour means that we had to get it out of the crucible, because the reason it is, the worst thing you can do with liquid metal is add water to it. And the way you heat up liquid metal is through water-based coils. There's like this thing called mitrosol, and there's like this liner that goes and creates this almost cement-like texture. And behind the cement-like texture is like these big steel bands that they put water in, and they use electricity to heat the water up. And this is how they basically melt metal. And what will happen is if the metal gets too hot like it will eat through that liner and get to those metal bands. And what happens to those metal bands, they go rupture and they're going to shoot water into the crucible itself. What happens when you drop water on a hot pan? You might in the chat, what happens when you drop water on a hot pan? It creates steam. It doesn't sizzle. It creates steam. Steam in an open atmosphere environment isn't nothing. It's like psh. It makes a little sizzle sound, little thing, whatever it might be. But if you put it if you put it underneath 40 tons of metal that's liquid, it's going to try to find a way out, right? Because that steam creates pressure, and that pressure is going to pocket, and what it basically does is it explodes. So we're back pouring this, and what happens when you back pour is the melter's sitting up like this, and it basically has these hydraulic legs that go like this, and it slowly tips forward so you can pour the metal out of the spout into an ingot. You pour it into the ingot. As we're pouring this metal, there's a lid on top of it, kind of like a teacup. The weight shifts, and it burns a hole and gets into and breaks one of the water bands and shoots water into the metal. And it literally shoots the fucking... I'm not fucking with you. This is like a 2.5 ton metal lid that's got a big hydraulic arm that's holding this lid on. It blows this thing through the fucking roof with a shot of metal. It's like boom! It sounded like a bomb went off. Like it literally threw the lid through the roof of the building. It's like holy shit. Regardless, nobody got hurt. But like that was the plant explosion story. And Greg didn't lose his job or anything because maintenance deemed that the light had burned out on the actual power box on the emergency stop. So like it was equipment malfunction, but it ended up costing like shit, millions of dollars. Yeah, this was before I fell. It was 2.5 stories, but like this was before the new sea line came. This is the old sea line. This was right before the housing recession. Yeah, I don't know where Greg works at now. I mean, I could ask. He's still my friend on Facebook. Nah, Greg wasn't fired. I mean, like Greg was a guy, like you've heard me tell stories about Greg before. Greg was one of the strongest men I've ever knew. I'm sure there's men stronger than Greg, but Greg had that fucking farm strength. Like you ever see, like, I don't know what the name of the channel, but there's a channel that does like fitness challenges. Like he has this thing called Mjolnir or whatever the fuck it is, Thor's hammer, and it's basically like this, 100-pound hammer or maybe 125-pound hammer that has this slick handle that you can't grip onto. And like Greg's the kind of guy that could walk up, do that shit, and collect his money. You okay, Kelly? Okay, I heard some pop. Mjolnir, yeah. Greg was strong. We had when we got steel in, they came in billets. Like on the billet truck, they were about this long and they're about this thick, but they're solid steel. They weigh about 215 kg a piece. So they're like 450 pounds. I've seen Greg take one of these bitches, pick it up off the ground, and throw it in the billet bin. And the billet bin's 8 feet high on the wall. And like I'm like, no sir, not for me. Because like I'm the kind of, he was strong.